Flagship Podcast, episode 295. Unless, folks, it's not going to be a pretty one, but I am joined by two pretty men, Stephen.
Thank you.
And Melly.
Yes, thank you.
The prettiest men in Celtic podcasting. I think you'll agree. Listen, Stephen, you said prior to recording, it's been a while. No, it was you, Melly. But Melly said prior to recording, Stephen, that it's been a while since we've had a crap week to talk about. It's been a crap week.
It's not been the best. It has been a little bit of a slog to get through this week, to be honest. The writing was on the wall, well, quite literally, when Ange announced his team for Thursday night, and it basically didn't really get any better from that point onwards, to be honest. Not any goals. We haven't even scored this week.
Nothing. We're going to be clutching at straws, but listen, it's still going to be the usual fun, entertaining 20 minutes as you're used to. So subscribe, comment, and hit like. Melly, nothing to hit like about this week, though, is there?
No, not really. The only thing you can say is we're still the same points ahead as we were going into the weekend, and after Celtic's game yesterday, you really feared the worst, thinking after a week where we got ahead and that wee bit of a gap, we've sort of let it go, especially after going out of Europe. When you look at that team and go, do you know what, maybe we're just concentrating on the league, to then drop points in the game right after that, where the team's meant to be fresh. And boy, oh boy, they did not look fresh.
But Stephen, this wasn't the deal we were sold, was it? Because when the Bodo lineup came out, we looked at the game and went, okay, cool. So he's basically, if I was being harsh, I could say throwing the towel in Europe here. If I was being charitable, I could say that the manager was utilising his squad to navigate the tie. Whatever we want to slice it, that Bodo lineup was picked with the Hibs game in mind, and it didn't pay off.
Well, there's only two possibles. There's only two possible ways to look at it. Either A, we just totally chucked it and threw the second string team in a bid to really just minimise damage to the squad and get sent packing from Europe, or that genuinely was the team that Ange Postecoglou believed could get the job done on the night. I know which one I'm more inclined to believe. It was a bit of a sore one, to be honest, because we all got up for it. We all thought, right, it was a bit of a tanking. We took it home, but we're still in this. We're still, we've got to go to Bodo and get something. I would love it. I would love it if we get
especially out the away goals thing this year. Yeah, 2-0. We're back in it, aren't we?
But
see, I was surprised though. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a bit annoyed that we did throw in the towel, because you're not really used to seeing Celtic managers do that. Do you know what I mean? And it was only Bodo. I know they were good. I know they were good at Celtic Park, Melly. But an early goal when you're right back in that tie, an early goal when you're putting the pressure on them, but when you're not playing your best players and when you're sending out some of the players that we will get to, you're really limiting your chances of getting that early goal. Now, another way you could have approached it was send out your best players, see how the first half goes, and if it's not going well, ring the changes and then save some bodies. But I just thought doing it the other way about. I was a wee bit disappointed to see that approach, really. And then when we didn't get the result against Hibs, I was even more disappointed.
Yeah, look, just on the night as well, when the team comes out, it's like Stephen said, on the build-up to it, we're obviously talking during the day about doing the big match build-up and all that, and then you get to it, and you're like, he's not even bothered about it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't.
Were you shocked to see a Celtic manager take that approach to a game against Bodo Glimt, a game that wasn't? It's not like we're beat 5-6-0. There was a slim lifeline in the tie left.
Yeah, look, I didn't think even if Celtic had played the first team, they would have got the result. But at the same time, I'd have liked to have seen it, because I think it's European football. They get an early goal over at Celtic Park. If they don't get that, the game's completely different. So if we get an early goal there, then we could have maybe went on to do something, got some confidence up. So I think, I was quite shocked to see it, especially as Ange as well. We've seen him this season, like Real Betis, he's like, no, Kyogo's going on a couple of 20 minutes into the game for somebody. So he's thrown caution to the wind before and it's backfired. Maybe that is why he's taking this approach in this game. But being a Celtic fan, growing up, watching Celtic in Europe, that was what I was raised on. And to see Celtic go into that game and just Ange pretty much say, we're not going to get through. Probably not, but you still want to see your team go out fighting.
Stephen, which player of that lineup, when you saw his name on the starting 11, you went, Ange doesn't fancy winning this today? Which player was it that signalled to you SOS or a big white flag?
Liam Scales.
Was that Liam Scales?
Liam Scales. And I'm not casting aspersions on his overall ability, but when I saw him in the team and near Beaton in the team, I thought there's absolutely no way you pick that team if you get any designs on winning this at all. You don't do it. You don't leave out Callum McGregor if this is a must-win game. No. You just don't do it. You don't drop Jota. You don't drop Greg Taylor. You just don't do these things. But I think Taylor and Welsh both being in that team signalled to me that it was basically the beginning of the end.
Scales, you mean?
Sorry, yes,
Yeah.
Scales and Welsh were the two guys that basically stood out as being inexcusable choices. Not, I mean, I don't mind them being in the team on occasion, but there's no getting away from the fact that seeing them in the team,
it sends a message.
Yeah, we're not going to win this year.
It sends a message. I think after the game, you could probably look at some of the performances and go, you know what, pre-match we were right to be worried about some of these guys. Near Bitton as well. I know we sort of joke about the Bitton bullshit, and he's come in a few times and he's did okay for us, but that performance there was just typical Near Bitton in Europe, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is the kind of problem I have. At the end of last season, I said, look, Rogic, Griffiths and Bitton, I want them gone because they're just there, and if you keep them around, you're going to need to play them at some point because you don't get rid of them and don't replace them. There's barely been a Celtic player in that sort of mould, a guy that doesn't play every week that we've got rid of and we've regretted.
Yeah.
Now, Tom Rogic has come in this season and done really well in parts, but I don't want to see him starting a European away game ever again, probably not even a European home game. But when Near Bitton, if Ange Postecoglou wants to play the way he plays, Near Bitton simply cannot play. And I'll even extend it to Scotland now because I'm tired of saying, he done all right, but I'm giving him he done all right for Near Bitton. He came on and he was effective, but that's not enough. Every time he plays in that number 6 and Cal McGregor doesn't there, Celtic are slow in everything they do. And it's not even on the ball, it was off the ball. Like, he's just watching the guy at the second. Well, that's not the problem, actually. He's not even watching the guy for the second goal. He's watching the ball. Just so pedestrian. And even the things you think you get from him, he's calm on the ball, he's good at passing. He was woeful at everything there. And just watching that, him, Rogic and James Forrest, I'm like, there's no place for you anymore because at some point, like these games, you're going to need to make an appearance for Celtic, and it's just too long. They're the 3 longest serving players in the team, and the 3 woefulest perform. Is woefulest a word?
It's now, baby.
The 3 worst performers on the night, because you can talk about why would they play? Well, they're experienced in Europe. Well, they're all the experience of any player on the pitch, and they were just abject.
Far too experienced in Europe for my liking, Stephen.
It's a good point because now that we've established, right, we've kind of set the tone here that we accepted this game was going to go badly from the minute the lineup was announced. But once you've got that out of the way, it does colour it influences your sort of take on the game, because you can't necessarily sit there and say, we should have done better there. The manager needs to find a way to win that game, etc., because it was clear from the start that they had really no interest in it. But once you've done all that, it then boils down to individual performances, and the game was woeful, absolutely woeful. And it reminded me of, I think we probably learned quite a lot about some players in that game, not like lasting condemnations on any of them or anything like that, but I remember years ago, it was Louis van Gaal was the manager of Man United, and he sent out a B team to play. Was it MK Dons? And they
4-0.
They get gubbed 4-0 in the cup, put out of the cup, and basically none of those players ever played again. I think Welbeck was the kind of main guy in that team, and none of them played basically for him again. And I think that it was basically just used as an opportunity to find out who's absolutely no use here. I can only hope that that's basically what's going to come of this, because some of the performances in that game were absolutely dreadful. And even if we're not really interested in going through, players have still got something to prove. Players are still playing for their place and all that. And to turn in the level of ineptitude in that game was embarrassing.
And the manager still, he's still playing for his job, obviously, because his job is down the line, but these players weren't forced upon it. It was a decision. He picked them. That was his approach to the game. And as you say, some of the performances were absolutely mental. And the Tom Rogic thing's been discussed. You're laughing, right?
Analytics there.
That's data.
Expected
mental performances. No, but like the Tom Rogic thing, I'm getting a wee bit tired of Tom Rogic because he's not been great for a while now. But he was crap, and then he came good, right? But when you says we do this with Near Bitton, we say he's quite good for Near Bitton. We do that for Tom Rogic as well, because the season is 38 domestic games, cup games in Europe and all that. Just because you play well in 4 or 5 domestic league games doesn't necessarily give you a free pass for the rest of the season. And there are some experienced guys in there who we just let off the hook. And if they weren't experienced, like say we'd signed James Forrest this summer, look at the pelters that we gave Abada on this very podcast, and then we've got James Forrest there. he's shite. I mean, you're laughing because it's James Forrest. You think, oh, James Forrest been Celtic along.
Yeah.
That performance for James Forrest, the performances that Forrest has turned in this season is terrible. And if it wasn't for lack of options on that side, James Forrest would either be out of the club or he'd be third or fourth choice winger.
Yeah, see if in January we had to sign Martin Boyle, and since January he'd put in the performances James Forrest, we'd be all like, waste of money. But it's because he's here and he's wee Jamesy, he's been a great servant in the past, fair enough. But at what point do you stop that and go, how far does that get you? Because like Forrest, he has been good. Well, in fact, he's had a few good seasons, but guys like Forrest, Beaton and Rogic, they've been there for ages, but they're not guys you can rely on to play every week. Whereas guys like Callum McGregor, Scott Brown, it was a shock when they weren't in the team. It was through injury, but these three guys have just been around because they've not been replaced rather than anything. And look, Tom Rogic, Motherwell away was brilliant that day, but you're looking at him in Europe. We asked for it last week. When do we get this Tom Rogic performance? And watching the game, you're like, Rogic and O'Reilly was terrible at the home game. So then with that midfield, you add in near Beaton and Callum instead of Callum McGregor and expect to get a better result. It's not going to happen. You cannot play this Ange fast-paced football in midfield, get it forward quickly with near Beaton and Tom Rogic in there. It's simply not going to happen.
I've not seen that Ange fast-paced football for weeks now. I've almost forgotten what it looks like, that Ange fast-paced stuff. We certainly didn't see it against Bodo Glimt. Some of the goals they scored, our gameplay was laughable. Like one pass and they're up the pitch, or the walking pace and
that tapping. The second goal was invisible.
Absolutely embarrassing.
I mean, I've been a big defender of Starfield on this podcast, as anyone who's watched or listened to them will know. I even got to the point where I thought, right, if this continues, I'm going to be sitting here listing the 8 things he's done wrong, but saying, but it's still fine. But even he was woeful against Bodo as well, and he did something I couldn't believe when I saw it, and I went on our Discord, which is a benefit of the all-in tier and our wonderful Patreon.
We're not going to give you the hard Patreon sale this week. We just expect you to sign up for it. But
just get on with it. Do you think all this stuff you see in front of, do you think this comes cheap? The answer is yes, but obviously, but some of it's really expensive. But where on earth was I going? Starfield. Yes, Starfield. He did something I couldn't believe, and I said, did anyone just see what he did there in our Discord forum? And everyone was just incredulous that he had just done it. He was making his way across from the left to the centre of the box, and Tony Ralston did exactly what you're supposed to do there. He made space. He appeared between two players, offering them a pass to effectively break their press, and then from there Ralston can just turn and do what he likes with it. That's the next thing. That's what you worry about in a minute. But instead of spotting that, Starfield just continued to where he was going and just booted the ball straight out of the pitch. And I was like, I can't believe what I've just witnessed there from this. Like, again, I've really defended Starfield this season because I think he's actually a good defender. But at some points watching him, I don't know why he was signed, because although I do think he is a good defender, and at the point where I was really defending this good defender, I believe that, but he's so bad on the ball, it kind of beggars belief.
That's one thing Ange pinpointed when he signed him. I remember that was one of Ange's sarky responses to a pundit. A pundit said, Ange's Starfield's pretty good on the ball, blah, blah, blah. Is that one of the reasons you signed him? And he went, well, of course, mate. And
I signed him,
yeah, that's one of the reasons I signed him. So, and now you're looking at some of these Starfield performances in Hibs. He shot himself with the ball at his feet against Hibs. The thing that's worried me about Bodo and about Celtic's performances in Europe and all that this season is they're largely the same. Insofar as we just concede dozens of goals. We concede, and it's literally dozens of goals. I think it was 20 goals between the group stage and that tie there. Did you say, Melly? It was like 2.5 on average. It was 2.5 goals a game we concede in Europe. You need to look at these games and go, well, maybe I can't play that way. And I know Ange's got this style and he wants to keep playing. He says the way we do it is get better and better and better. I don't know how he quite squares that circle when you field that team, because you're not going to get any better playing your worst players. Yeah. But a part of me's thinking, right, well, if you're married to this way you want to play and it's not working in Europe, maybe the worst thing in the world isn't going to be finding a plan B. Because if you want to play that way in Europe, we need to go out and get much, 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 much better players, because the guys we've got, they're just hemorrhaging goals. And we saw it, even if you want to take the Bodo ties in isolation, some of the goals were laughable.
Yeah, and look, Europe's been it's been a wild ride this season because right at the start we are going to get absolutely pumped by MD because we had no players. We managed to sort of get ourselves into the Europa League, and that was a bit above expectation because we got Alkmaar, and then when you're in the group stages, some of the performances were good, but we're conceding so many goals, and again the Bodo game in both legs, it just felt like Celtic in previous Europes where we said it under Neil Lennon all the time. Why one or two passes our team's right in on us? They seem to be one-on-one, and just watching the game, you're like, see the way Ange plays, I think that's the way we should play. Short passing football, be attacking and try and impose your game on it. I don't think if Celtic were to start punting the ball long, we get any better results because the ball will just come back. But I think within the way you play, you can tweak things. You can play two holding midfielders in there. So once Rogic and O'Reilly are up, if the ball breaks down, they're not in on a defensive midfielder. You could go 4-3-2-1 with two sitting midfielders. There's different ways to do it, and you don't need to change much about you're changing the formation, but you're not changing the style of play or anything like that.
You see that quite a lot whenever you sort of say things like, oh, maybe we need to find a different way to approach these games. People immediately go, well, would you want this to be long ball? Nah, because it's no one extreme to the other. It's not one or the other. And I think one of the things that does get us, we're just so cut open all the time in Europe, and it's so quick. And I think it was you that said that on one of the reactions, or might have been that reaction podcast. You're just like, how do we always come up against these teams who are more athletic, better passers of the ball, better drilled than us? And it's crazy.
Everyone seems.
I keep calling things crazy and mental, but I mean, this week has been an eye opener.
I think everyone just seems to be so much bigger and faster and stronger than us in Europe all the time. I don't really know what the answer to that is. We're back to Gordon Strachan's genetics part there. So I don't really know what you do about that. But yeah, it simply can't go on conceding this number of goals. That goes without saying. It's a very obvious thing to say, but we're going to get nowhere.
Did we have the worst defensive record in the Europa? I think we did.
It was up there or down,
second
down,
worst,
down there, however you want to look at it. It was definitely because it was us and Ferencváros. Was it not? At one point, we're trading blows at the top of the table for that. So, that was a thrilling title race for the worst defence in Europe. But it can't go on because we need to find a way to be a wee bit more solid. It doesn't. You're right though. It doesn't involve completely throwing your principles out the window in order to get a little bit more difficult to beat. It's not either we're a Sam Allardyce team or we're total gung ho Ange Postecoglou. There are many degrees in between those. Surely,
this week's been difficult because again, I feel this is all like when we were talking about it. When you were talking about the Interaction podcast, when you're going. AEK Athens, Cluj, Copenhagen, and you're rhyming off teams from the past 10 years that Celtic have been beaten by. And it's a familiar story again, but I'm trying to sort of separate my PTSD from all that and from last season to just look at this and go, like, we done well to get through the qualifiers, the group stages. We had two really good teams in it that did score a lot of goals and look, fair enough, we get through Ferencváros, that was fine. So I'm trying to separate that. But then when you watch this game, you're going, right, these are two one-off ties where we haven't got all the excuses of, the first Betis game, we didn't have any players in, and it was a couple of weeks after the deadline had shut, so players were injured and all that. We kind of had a settled team going into this, and we get ripped apart. And the thing is, but it doesn't look hard to rip us apart.
Yeah, well, that's it.
In these games, and he kind of didn't get that. You could kind of give a wee bit of leeway in the group stages because it's a new team coming together, but the team came into these games flying. We were playing really well apart for the Rafe game, but we changed the team for that. Yeah. So when you look at this game, that's why it's so disappointing. And we're looking at Bodo Glimt as well. They'd lost a lot of players, but they are very good at what they do. And you're like, but surely we can be like that. And when I'm looking at...
what's the difference? What do you think the difference is between Bodo Glimt and us?
I think they're just a bit further on in their development. That manager's been there a few seasons. They're champions 2 years in a row. And when you look back on successful Celtic managers in my lifetime, Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, even Neil Lennon, Brendan Rodgers, their first season... Europe is difficult because even Ange, he's not really managed a big team in Europe before. He's coming into this competition. He's still new to it. All these players are new. So you kind of get that first season in Europe where things don't look good, because when Celtic's second season in Europe under managers has been pretty good. Martin O'Neill, we had the good Champions League runs where we went up against Juve and all that. Gordon Strachan, we qualified from the group stages. Lennon, well, he had a couple of years he was bad, but even Brendan Rodgers, we managed to get through and difficult into the Europa League. So I think that first season, you kind of get your team settled and then go into it. But again, it's the conceding goals thing, because it doesn't look like, if Ange doesn't change what he's doing, it's going to still happen, I think, because like Bodo, Glimt, we're a good team, but we want to be competing with better teams than that. And when you look at Rangers as well, they're competing with better teams and they don't have much better players than us.
Sometimes you hear these arguments, it was like, well, we didn't expect to do very well in Europe, and people come to us and say at the beginning of the season you said, a decent Europa League run, and you would take that, and you think, aye, but that's at the beginning when you think we're crap.
Yeah.
But then you see how good this Celtic team can be, and a result like that is harder to take. And I think that's the thing that sort of made it so difficult for me, is because we've no seen, Melly says the fans wants to play this fast-paced, close. We never saw even a glimpse of that against Bodo at any time. We didn't even get the chance to impose our style on Bodo Glimt. So it's not like we went, oh, that was really close. Like we really gave it, because we have done that. We did it against Leverkusen. We did it against Betis. These ties looked different to the other European ties we've seen before that. And what's more worrying for me, I think, is that the performance in that Bodo game, it's kind of the lacklustre type performances that we've been seeing from Celtic in the last couple of weeks, just carried into a European tie.
Well, I didn't realise you were going to say the last couple of weeks. I thought you were just going to say like nothing's changed in Europe at all.
Well, that's true as well.
It's the same every year, regardless of manager. And we've already spoken about the list of the teams that basically put us out. It's these middling European teams that put us out every single year now. We can basically set your watch by it. I don't know why we're surprised this time, because well, I know why we're surprised, because you build yourself up and you get carried away with the season. You set your goals at the start of the season when you've got guys like Dane Murray and all that in the team, and you think, well, we'll be doing well if we get qualified for Europe and all that. It's not a slight on Dane Murray, by the way. It's just an example of where we were earlier in this season. We got Uragide and all that floating about the squad. So it's deflating, to be honest, because I sat here a couple of weeks ago and I was talking about how the recruitment that's been done this season is basically like some of the best I've ever seen, like up there with the best I've had in my lifetime in terms of building an entire team. The recruitment we've just done in the previous window looked excellent. So it seemed like all the tools were there for us to do a little bit better than that. But I think I do agree with Mel. I think we're just not ready yet. I think they're just a wee bit further on in their journey in organising a team, because
they're 28 games unbeaten as well, so that's a momentum for him. I know the season finished, but
yeah, exactly. And I don't want to do that kind of token thing where I start talking about how like rebuilds and where we were this time last season, because I think there's only so far you can take that without boring people and it just becoming slightly trite to say that. But I think it is going to take time to put the structure in place at Celtic for success to come of this in Europe in particular. And I think Bodo Glimt are just better at it than us for the time being.
I mean, if I was being charitable, I could say there's an element of Bodo are a good team. We know they're a good team. We know that they had strong players. We know that they've had strong results in Europe already.
Yeah.
And had they not lost the players they'd lost, and had it been mid-season, we probably wouldn't have expected to beat them. We probably would have thought it'd been a much bigger tie.
Yeah.
But the fact that they did lose a lot of players, the fact that it was effectively pre-season for them, we sort of put that on the balance and the scales going, well, maybe that'll actually affect them negatively. Yeah. And in the end up, it didn't. In the end up, they managed to sign a very good profile of player that slotted right in, who fitted right in, they knew what they were getting. And the fact that it was pre-season didn't seem to make any difference, because they obviously knew these ties were coming up and just trained through and kept the fitness up like they were doing. And that ultimately, it was just too difficult a tie for us. But I think coming back to it, what gets me is we didn't give a good account of ourselves.
No.
And the fact that the manager kind of sent a team out, he didn't send them out to lose, because that's ridiculous, because ultimately it's on the players and they could have played a lot better than they did, and some of the performances were garbage.
It's the most experienced team we could play.
But I just... there was nothing of Ange ball. I'm beginning to really get toe curl. That was nothing of the Ange Postecoglou Celtic team that we've seen this season in any of those performances.
No, it wasn't. And the damage was done in the first leg. It was, when you think back to the first leg, we spoke about it, Celtic weren't bad, but they just conceded goals. And when you're going to concede 3 goals at home in a first leg, it's going to be
Was
damaging.
that the Celtic manager looking at that tie going, I don't think my team can beat them, so I'm just going to send some other people out? Was that the Celtic manager looking at a game going, I don't think my team can win that? Because I don't think I've ever seen that before.
It looks like it, doesn't it? I mean, if you're going to play your first team, yes, they might give a better account, but where are they going to beat Bodo away from home, plastic pitch and all that? Everything was against Celtic, but that was Celtic's fault because of their performance in the first leg. They let in poor goals, they get cut open, and even like the manager didn't learn from the first game. They're playing the same midfield, or playing a weaker midfield in the second leg. It's a hard one to take because you're trying to give Ange Postecoglou the benefit of the doubt over there, but it's also a hard one to take for the fans. Like, I was speaking to people at the game yesterday that went in that game, got a day trip there. They were on a plane for 8 hours because it couldn't land and it was circling. They got off a plane, had to walk to a stadium, snow, ice everywhere, got in, pissed on all over the game and had to watch that, jump in a plane on the way back. Well, the rain. Oh, maybe there was.
You have to pay extra for that.
So people paid a lot of money to go to that, and for the manager to turn up to that and just go, well, there's no chance here, so I'm just going to field the second strings. No very fair either. Because
what's Celtic's level in Europe then? I mean, if it's not the Champions League, it's not Champions League, it's no Europa League, and it's obviously not the Conference League. I mean, people might be inclined to say that this, and you kind of touched on it, that this tournament has come a wee bit too early for Celtic.
Yeah.
But as much as I kind of appreciate that, I also think we've condensed a lot into a season in terms of transfers, in terms of how far the team's come, in terms of implementing a style of play. You know, I don't think there's much like of this rebuild left to do. You've got all the pieces there, you just have to make them work. So, is it too early for Ange, or is it have we got an inflated idea? I'll come back to just what Stephen said, not spoke for. Is it just an inflated idea of maybe Celtic's level? Are we just, did they introduce a new tournament just to show us we're not that level either?
I think there's definitely an element of that. That's that last part there. We've basically just got an inflated idea of what Celtic are just now. There's nothing wrong with that. That's going to happen. We're all fans at the end of the day. We all expect a certain level of success, and we've all come to know a certain level of success, let's face it. But in terms of the bare facts of it, we're absolutely nowhere in Europe, and it's kind of miserable.
That's you being a Celtic fan and getting everything over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just take it this season, we done well to get into Europa League and we competed in that, and we're put out by 2 teams that are better than us. We beat Lazio 2 seasons ago, so we can compete in this. But it's just last season we couldn't, and this season we did, and then we've had this horror show in this tie. It doesn't mean
once you're cut off.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
Well, we progressed from the tournament, so we were in that Europa League group playing well, and then we went out to 2 teams that are better than us. One team who's banned from Europe next year because of financial irregularities. So it's 2 tough teams, and then we
Which
go.
Which team's that, by the way?
Real Betis.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
So we're going into this, and I still think this first season is a learning curve for managers, but it's just a hard one to take because it does remind you of everything else we've been through. But if you're looking at it solely on this season, getting into Europa League was an absolute bonus because as soon as we got Alkmaar, we wrote it off because they're a good team. We are in disarray here. We managed to get 3rd spot and played well and competed in every game, so that was good. But then we get this game and it's kind of overshadowing the rest because it was so bad. So you kind of need to take this game in isolation. I don't think you can. If we had went out to Alkmaar and then get beat by Bodo in the qualifiers, you're like, where are we in Europe? We need to write this season.
How many points did we get in our Europa League group? Was it 4?
No, we beat Ferencváros twice and Betis.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
I think where I'm talking about the
fuck, I get 4.
size night, it was actually quite good.
Was it 4 under Neil Lennon? Did we get 4 with Neil Lennon the season before in the Europa League?
We get a couple of
because I was looking back, so it's poisoned my mind. Obviously.
Where I'm talking about the inflated sense of where we should be is that we all think we're kind of destined to be a Champions League team again. Like, I think that's where
all we need to do is win the league.
That's it, right? That's where we've come from. That's where we want to be back at, is the Champions League. But all we've spoken about this season is the added incentive of automatic qualification for the Champions League this season. But you actually imagine us playing the games of it? Like, forget the money and all that. Can you actually imagine us playing the games in the Champions League? I'm talking purely today as we record this, right?
I do have something on that. Part of me thinks if Bodo were, for example, Dortmund, we would have given a better account of ourselves, because it's probably easier to get yourself up for these games. You think big game, big tournament, big opposition. You know what I mean? We're going to really, the players mentally and psychologically can probably get themselves up for that. Whereas a really, really well drilled but small team that you may not have heard of before, called Bodo Glimt, maybe mentally you don't prepare yourself so much for that. You think there's anything in that?
Maybe. I could imagine that. It's tremendously disrespectful. And
there's no Bodo people watching this.
And it is laced with hubris. But
are you saying Bodo Glimt in the first ever UEFA European Conference League, is that what it's called? Isn't a big tie for...
Well, look, I'm not so concerned about being disrespectful to Bodo Glimt, because we sit here every week and call James Forrest shite, and members of his family probably watch this, so I don't think there's anybody from Bodo watching it for a start. But what I'm saying is, well, I think deep down we want to be Bodo Glimt. We want to be that European team that sort of come under the radar a wee bit and take a scalp like we've had in the past.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. And I think Melly's right. I think we could be on the way to that. I think we could be on the way to that again. But in summary, what I was talking about, where we currently are, you need to take the bare facts of it. And we're just tried to qualify for the Champions League, didn't manage it. Went out of the Europa League after some decent games, right enough, and then went out of the Conference League. With a fart, as Jamie put it the other night on the reaction, I think it was. So the absolute facts of it, as we sit here today, we're at nothing in Europe currently. That doesn't mean we're always going to be that way, but I think we're at the very, very start of this journey. Hopefully, we can get better. But are we a Champions League ready team at the moment? We're absolutely miles off it, going on evidence.
Do you think, given that, look, Ange Postecoglou's not daft, I know we're always told he sticks to the one style of play, but if you look back at his career, he's played different formations at different teams he's been at. He does adapt to things.
Managing, as it sounds.
I don't believe for a minute, by the way, incidentally, I know you didn't say that, but you sort of touched, you skirted the issue that there's this Ange, when he says I want to play our brand. That's not religiously one type of football that he always plays. You know, it's not literal. Some people think it. Yeah, some people out there think it's literal.
We could do that in one day. Just turn up the first day of the season, right? This is how we play. See you in May, guys.
Well, we played this way against Rangers and Livingston and St Johnstone and Wraith Rovers and Albion Rovers.
You've got it, guys.
We play one way. No.
There will be tweaks he makes in there, but do you see him making the tweaks necessary for us to stop conceding goals, or do you think it is the fact that, look, see in 6 to 7 months' time, when we're either try to qualify for the Champions League or in the Champions League, will these players, plus maybe say 3 quality players coming into this squad, will that be enough for Celtic to compete in the Champions League? Because going into the Champions League, having not been there for so long, Celtic aren't going to qualify from their group, even if they're in it. We're looking to get third place probably and not get nil point. So it's going to be difficult no matter what. But do you think he will tweak things?
Well, I think he can tweak things, right? But I'm reluctant to get involved in the argument that says we need better players. If we keep signing better players, because that's an infinite argument. You know, you go at the if we just buy better players. So the manager has to, as Stephen said, he has to work with what he's got. I think it's difficult to judge the European. Like, you can't look at the Bodo away game, because I think the home game is more representative of the team that's going to take the park. So you think, well, you look at that Bodo home game and you think, how could we have won that? How could we have won that? What went wrong in that Bodo home game? You could probably use a better centre half, a better left back.
Kyogo as well.
Maybe get Kyogo involved. And then maybe if you've got those better players and we play with the style that we were looking to play with, maybe you get a better result. But again, it just brings me back to my very first point. The manager just can't constantly go, I didn't need better players. You know, it's not going to happen at Celtic. You're not going to get Champions League players. So if you want to progress in these tournaments, you have to be a bit canny. You have to be a bit imaginative with the resources you've got.
Which we have done this season. We spoke about how good the recruitment's been, and that's why this tie was so because you thought, we're going somewhere here that maybe once we get this, we could win this tie and then maybe get another one, and it'd be a nice wee run. Couple that with winning the cup and the league, so you're like, oh yes, but then to be brought crashing back down to earth, and all the memories come flooding back of
But
previous seasons.
what's the measurement of the progress we've made, Stephen? If not Europe, are we just back to this flat track? But okay, so we're doing okay in the league. We're not going to break any records in the league looking by it, but we've improved massively on last season.
Yeah.
But there comes an element of last season where you just have to accept that at one point in the league, the players knew the game was a jig. The manager knew the game was a jig. Celtic was probably a toxic place to work, and eventually tools went down.
Aye, by November to January, it was.
Yeah, so you can't really compare like for like in the league at all times. So Europe is probably the litmus test, and we're back to this flat track bullies argument.
For now, I mean, that always is. We're always going to judge Celtic managers on their performance in Europe to a point, though, because I think Brendan Rodgers didn't really do anything in Europe.
No.
A couple of decent results here and there. Did really well against Man City quite early on, and that kind of set the expectations maybe a wee bit too high, and then we got tankings off the other big teams that came up against. But I don't know if that certainly hasn't tarnished his legacy, unlike the other stuff, the sneaking at the back door and stuff like that. So it's not going to be the only test that you're measured against as a Celtic manager, but it's a big one. It is a big one because whether we want to say it out loud or not, we are big fish in a small pond, and it's the Celtic and Rangers dynamic is the kind of main one in the league. So you beating them to the league after what happened last season is going to be huge, but I think by and large most, if not every fan, is going to have that kind of, we need to do something in Europe. Without being too trite about it, it's a tradition, it's the Celtic way and all that, and any other number of cliches that I'm spouting here, but that's the reality of it. It's a storied European club, and we need to be somewhere in Europe.
I think if you're looking at it this season compared to last, we've definitely progressed in Europe because the tankings we took off Sparta Prague were the worst, the most embarrassing.
How
I've
have I
ever
managed to
been.
talk about that 2 weeks in a row on here? Goodness me.
Just a wee reminder, Stephen. So
looking up to Sparta Prague, hovering above the stadium. How am I doing, boss?
So in that sense, we have, and I think it's just that first leg absolutely killed us here. It was one of those games like we didn't concede a lot of chances, but they were clinical, and that's what you're up against in Europe. So now this is a brand new team, yes, rebuilding all that, but these players, a lot of them haven't played in Europe before, so you can take that as a learning curve for them and the manager. But if it's going to be a learning curve, you have to learn from it. We can't go into Europe next season and see the same things because it'll wear very, very thin.
Yeah.
We can play well and domestically and play brilliantly, but you have to manage that and do well in Europe as well, because it's not enough to just be winning trebles then getting scalped in Europe. We'll take going into whatever competition and competing. I don't think we expect to, because we see Liverpool, Porto and Man City, Sporting Lisbon, like was it 5 and 6-0 those game finishes? So they're better teams than us, but we want to be, if we get into these competitions, we have to be doing better than that against Bodo Glimt, and it's not always down to the players as well. The manager has to go, right, maybe I do need to adapt how I've set the team out. You don't need to just punt it long, or you can still keep the same philosophy, but you need to change something.
He needs to find a way, doesn't he? He needs to find a way, and look, that
there's not going to be any major, but probably it's just
and
can do it with the players we've got.
And that's it. And I think part of the thing is we've got a squad, and there's players that we can use, and we utilise that squad against Bodo away to give us the best chance of getting a result against Hibs. And thank fuck we did, Stephen.
I've been thinking about this.
Right.
See if you go through a game not looking like you want to win at all, like not scoring, not really creating all that many clear-cut chances. If you play out a 0-0 draw, it is literally impossible for you to throw away a 2-0 lead at home. Memed myself there. But of course, I'm talking to other events the same afternoon, which made us majorly get off for once.
Yes.
Majorly.
We wriggled off that hook big time.
I'd already resigned myself to it being 1 point. One point going into the next set of games, and that did not look like a good proposition at all. But they've managed to bail us out there. But the Hibs game was another disappointment. Yeah, another deep disappointment. Mel, you were at it. I didn't envy you that at all. It was It's left me thinking that it's happened before this season. We had a chat months ago, I think it was now, where we had kind of run into a bit of a dearth of creativity in the team. I said, was it just last week? I said we had a problem out wide. I didn't think the wingers were functioning all that well. I didn't realise it was going to kind of bite as quickly as that. But there was previously this season where we just sort of ran out of ideas going forward. But that coincided with not having Kyogo. I think there were several players injured. I think there was Jota and Abada both out as well. With Turnbull,
and Kyogo were out as well.
That's right. Turnbull was playing through the middle at one point, and I thought, right, we're not playing particularly well just now, but here's probably the reasons why. We've not got an attack force here. And the reason I remember that so clearly is because there were some whispers that it was being blamed on the silent protests. Remember?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, there was a few fan silent protests, and everyone's like, "Oh, see, they're affecting the results." I'm like, "Well, get David Turnbull playing centre forward."
I remember we had Juranovic and Owen Moffat against St Mirren's away.
That's right. So I don't think that's like this though. I think we've basically just hit some bad form. I think the team's just out of form. That was always going to happen.
Disagree with you.
Yeah. Publicly, anyway, he certainly has. But I think it was always going to happen because, again, something we've spoken about very recently was how many games Celtic were winning. We won loads and loads of games from the Bayer Leverkusen game onwards, like 24 out of 27 or something we'd won. But then it started in the last 3 or 4 weeks, basically since half time at Aberdeen. I think we've just not looked quite the same. Blew Rangers away, went out and did the same to Motherwell. Threatened like we were going to do against Aberdeen, and then ever since then it's been a wee bit shaky form.
We've been talking about the form of the podcast for a wee while, Melly, and we did say, I think it might have been last week, we might have said you can't play that badly and expect to continue to win games, and there was an element of that Hibs result being in the post for a while.
Yeah, it's a tough game going to Easter Road. It's one of those games when, in the grand scheme of it, and you're looking at the form, I think it's 8 domestic games since we came back in January, and that's the only one we've dropped points in.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world, but because we've been playing well and got ahead in the league, and you said it last week, it's only 3 points despite us winning all those games. The turnaround's been good, but looking at the game as well, it was the performance that was more alarming than anything, because we've had the results early in the season where we've just peppered the goal and just couldn't finish them off. We've created chances, but in this one, you've got the feeling in previous games like the Dundee United game we were at with a Bada goal and all that, that it was coming. Even the Dundee game last week, we've got enough here. But that game, there was nothing. Like the players didn't get the crowd going at all. There wasn't that big chance where you thought, and then there was another chance after it that makes you believe towards the end of this game we'll get something, because Celtic were just doing the complete basics and fundamentals wrong. It was bobbling off players. It was summed up by Hatate at the end when he ran over to stop the ball going out of play, and he just slipped over and the ball rolls out, and you're like, it's not our day today. And to have so many players off form, like even Callum McGregor's passing was poor. The three in midfield were woeful. Jota was blazing things over from miles out. There was no chances getting created for Maeda, and even Abada missed two decent chances that most other times you'd think he'd bury them, but it was the performance. You never felt like Celtic aren't going to win this, and that was from quite early on.
I think the Celtic players got a wee bit frustrated. I think Ange says he was happy with the performance, or he was happy with the approach rather, but the result.
Control as well, controlled the game.
We did control the game, but again, Celtic always do.
Aye.
And a lot of the times teams let us. You know, the teams in the domestic league don't ever take the game to us. They always sit back, condense the defence, sit really deep, low block, as everybody wants to call it now.
Don't know what you're talking about, mate. Hibs pressed us manically according to their Twitter.
Yeah, according to their Twitter feed, Hibs are very impressed by that.
There was one point where I just checked the stats on FotMob on my phone watching the game, and I think it was about 55, 60 odd minutes. And Hibs had an XG, an expected goals of 0.00, and Celtic had like 0.55 or something like that. So it was one of those games.
I can understand maybe where Ange was a wee bit disappointed with the game insofar as we did have a good couple of chances. But I think the problem is Maeda. And what I'm saying with that is I'm no 100% convinced by Maeda yet. And I know there'll be people in the comments saying he scored X amount of goals and X. Okay, that's fine, right? But the problem is, when teams force us wide and just let us say, okay, if you're going to score against us, you're going to have to score a cross. We're throwing crosses in, 40 odd crosses, what we had in that game, to a 5'7" striker who's just getting mauled by defenders. And that I don't think that's Maeda's game. I don't think it's his fault, but I don't think that's his game either. But Hibs were so condensed defensively that we couldn't really get any sort of attacking threat any other way. Now, we were talking about this before the podcast. The difference with Maeda and Giakoumakis is when Giakoumakis isn't scoring, he's working his arse off. He's doing absolutely everything else. Maeda, he does a lot of running, a lot of closing off, but he doesn't put himself about. He's no holding defenders. He's no rolling defenders. He's no bringing other people into play. He's a bit like an Ayeti who runs a wee bit more than Albion Ayeti does. He's that type of player, that penalty box player. You think he wants balls threaded through so he can run on them and finish them into the net and by the keeper, but he's no...
Say Klamala. Say Kenny Miller. Just do it.
No, I think that's a wee bit unfair. I think that is a wee bit... Not as bad as like the Kenny Miller or Klamala. He's not an out and out, not a dog chasing a ball. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? He's not that sort of player. He's more like a Gary Hooper that runs a wee bit more, but it's... I think, put it this way, I think if Giakoumakis was playing, we probably would have won that game.
Yeah, I think so. And that doesn't mean to say Maeda's a bad player. It's just he's a completely different qualities to him, because we've seen the Dundee game. It was that header was, you're not going to really get, I know Maeda scored a header recently, but when you've got Giakoumakis, you've got options to go low or go high. With Maeda, you don't. And Maeda's already scored a goal against Hibs. It was a low cross and he gets in there and scores. We didn't do that at all for him at the weekend. And
there's just too many bodies for the low cross. That's what I mean. Like Hibs had at one point they had 3 and 5. They were really, really... There was 10 bodies behind the box. Even Ange said it after the game. One of the things that I did buy, he says, look, even when we're crossing, there's 20 bodies in the box. It's very difficult to get the ball in the back of the net at that point.
Yeah, there is, but that means what you need to do is be better with your passing and your crossing. And Celtic simply, their passing was dreadful. Absolutely. Tom Rogic dribbled once and the ball was behind him because he forgot to bring it with him. What are you doing? So this is the thing, when you've got so many players that aren't doing the basics right and the fundamentals, when you're getting into these areas, it's taking longer, which means they're getting back quicker. Like Celtic are at their best when they're getting it forward quicker. Somebody's making a run beyond. There's 2 different guys you can take out. I can remember it was only 2 or 3 times in the second half we managed to get it out wide and get the overlap so a player could either go inside or play it down. We just didn't do it enough. And you're asking yourself, what's the difference between this team and the team 3 weeks ago that was wiping the floor with Rangers and Motherwell? There's not a massive difference.
For a start, we're not taking on as many shots. I remember watching, and this isn't something that specifically has been flagged up by anyone, but I just remember watching Celtic and going, God, and you watch the stats on FotMob or Google after it, and you're like, every game prior to Rangers, we were consistently getting plus 20 shots on goal. And I was like, this is mad. Like almost every game we're peppering the goal. Since that sort of half-time at Aberdeen point, I don't think we've had 20 shots on goal in one game since. So we're not even getting as many shots off as we used to. And another thing that I'm not seeing so much is, in my head, obviously this isn't based on any stats I've been looking at, but in my head I picture Jota. He liked to cut inside and take the shot. I think he did that 2 or 3 times against Hibs, but every time he was leaning back and he were right over the bar. But you think, well, if we're not getting any luck with the crosses, keep doing that. Keep cutting inside and taking your man on. But it seems like in the last couple of games, Stephen, we've just resorted to masses of, and the crosses are all dead floaty.
Oh no.
And what there's always it seems like there's always just one guy attacking it. I remember it was the Dundee game. I think we're attacking the front post, and fair enough, Giakoumakis got a goal at the front post. But when the ball went over his head, there's nobody at the back post.
Yeah, and the crosses as well. I mean, Maeda did score from a cross against Bodo, in fairness, so that was a pinpoint one that he just glanced across. But you look at some of the crosses against Hibs, and it is just floaty, chipped things in.
Yeah,
the keeper's huge, you know.
Yeah,
and that is about 6 or 7 or
that's
something.
The difference. Bodo were defending like a normal team. Like we'd chip across in, they'd have maybe 4 defenders in or whatever. But that Hibs box was condensed, and you're like, we're trying to pick out Maeda amongst 10 Hibs bodies.
I had to laugh at the Aidan McGeady talking about how they're putting in too many clipped floaty crosses. I was like, you would know. You would spot one of them, son. I did. Intensely charismatic performance on Sky Sports. It's a very, very frustrating game. Like you look at Maeda's performance, and I said last week I was relaxed about his contribution, and I still am. It's just unfortunate that I said that. just before a very poor game from him. I still think he's going to be a good player, and people do say to you, but he's had X amount of goal contributions in so many games or whatever it is. Yeah, that's absolutely fine, and he has done that, but that's not valid when he turns in a performance like that, because you watch him playing a game like that and you think, well, right, the stats are telling me that thing that he's done previously, but he's not being sent out there to take bad touches on the halfway line and let the ball pad off him and miss sitters and not getting on the end of chances. Those things happened in that game. That's there's no point in telling me that he scored a game in a previous game. Scored a goal in a previous game rather. So I think he's been pretty good for Celtic so far. It looks a wee bit low in confidence. I don't think it's helped by the fact that Ange doesn't seem to have, and with good reason, he doesn't seem to have any faith in some of the current backup attackers. James were chasing a goal in that game, really desperate for a goal, in fact, because drop points there, Rangers could go out and win. They didn't. Key thing to remember is they didn't. And so they could have easily gone out and won that game, like I think we all expected them to do. So we're desperate for a goal, and James Forrest doesn't even get on the pitch. Karamoko doesn't come on. It would have been fanciful to stick him in there and expect him to turn the game. But James Forrest, our big game player and all that, doesn't even make the pitch. In my head, just
Were you surprised he only made one substitution in the game?
Yes. I don't know. Having thought about it just off the top of my head, I don't know what I would have done necessarily, but I was quite surprised to see just one sub when we're desperately chasing a goal, as I say.
Highest assister was on the bench, so...
It's Tony Rowell. That's very true.
I mean, you're looking at the bench, I'm looking at here, Bitton, McCarthy, Adeguchi, Scott Bain, Matt O'Reilly, James Forrest, Ralston, Welsh and Dembele. I mean, there's none of them screaming game changer, is there?
No. Matt O'Reilly came on and was better than Rogic, but that doesn't mean he was good, because Rogic was dreadful. But apart from that, what are you looking at? Forrest on for Abada. If you're asking me who's more likely to get a goal, it's always going to be Abada. So
plenty of shoring up options on there. Beaton, McCarthy, Andy Degucci, and Welsh or whoever it was.
For 5-0 up, it would have been class.
Are we blowing this out of proportion a wee bit? I mean, it's just a 0-0 draw away at Hibs. We're not going to... if in the course of a league, no matter what the season is, when you look across the whole course of a league, you're going to drop points here and there.
Yeah.
And it's just because the title race is so needly and it's so tight. And as Rangers showed that they drop points, maybe there's a European hangover. Maybe I'd be more inclined to believe the European hangover thing had he not rested so many players.
Yeah.
For the game, because how do you get a hangover in a game that you didn't really play? But I mean, is there an element of like blowing this out of proportion a wee bit? Do we just have to accept sometimes we're going to drop points, especially in a difficult game like that?
Yeah, I think, look, when you, after the game, you're obviously very disappointed because the performance was poor, but in the grand scheme of it, we're saying Celtic haven't been great recently, but if you look at our league form, it is sensational. Absolutely sensational, and there's no getting away from that. We said that you can't just keep winning games. Easter Road away is a tough game for Celtic. We don't have a great...
It's been for a while,
we won there earlier in the season, but before that, it's been a long time since we won there in the league. It's a tough game, and you're looking at it, it comes off the back of the European thing as well, and you're expecting a reaction after going out that, and Celtic just sort of looked passive, but it's because it is so tight. And look, I'd resign myself to it straight after the game. Well, that's 1 point then, and we've got St Mirren during the week, and then we've got Livingston away next week, so you're like that. But look, we were on the bus. We were on the
real
bus.
bogey team, aren't they?
Aye, that's the problem. There's no room for any sort of slip ups here. And look, you come back in the bus and you hear, we didn't even get to hear Rangers were 1-0 up because it was too quick for our goals. It's 2-0, and you think, well, that's it. Please don't batter them so it cuts down in the goal difference. So we got an absolute bonus yesterday, because no matter how disappointed we are, it is 10 times worse for them, because look at us at that I already mentioned the Dundee United game when they dropped points to Ross County. We went in there, and then the later that game's going and we didn't weren't getting the result, and then to get it and then beat them in the next game. It's all about that. But now we're down to 10 games to go. They need to better us in 2 games. So it is, we got off on one there, but they'll definitely be more disappointed. And you see the final whistle in the Rangers game when it ball goes back to Al McGregor and he boots up in there.
Yeah.
What empty seats about for a team?
Oh, they were leaving. I watched
chasing a goal, supporting their team.
They still made the noise count at the final whistle right enough. Even if a few of them had left, I still heard them.
Yeah, they were not happy. Do you think ultimately going out of Europe might benefit us in the league? Because if Rangers, I think they'll probably get through. They're not called Red Star Belgrade anymore. I'm not sure.
I don't know how to
Oh,
pronounce
he doesn't
it.
even know.
I
I
know.
know, so
States.
disrespectful, Stephen.
Red's
Pathetic.
for getting
Yeah, something like
nailed,
definitely that.
nailed it.
Cresty or something,
Aye.
So you'd think maybe Rangers get by them, another 4 ties in Europe, in an already congested season. It's going to be pretty tricky for them.
Yeah, well, in a way, them, I was kind of relaxed about their participation in Europe as well, because I thought it was win-win for Celtic. If they beat Borussia Dortmund, then it's another pretty hard tie that they're going to need to play in amongst this title race. If they go out, then it could be quite demoralising for them. So I thought either way, that's absolutely fine. I didn't really expect for us to go out and be completely demoralised and then drop points in the next game, right enough.
The Motherwell at home game, if you're looking at our fixtures and their fixtures, Hibs away and probably Livingston before we come up against each other, you're like, we could maybe drop points in one of them. You wouldn't look at them playing Motherwell and go, they might drop points there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you need to take
At
these.
home. Yeah.
We have got, St Mirren Livingston next.
St Mirren, Livingston, yeah.
Martindale rubbing his wee slimy
Yeah,
claws
I
right
know,
now.
God. Just having seen the last couple of games and based on the performances we've seen the last couple of weeks, Stephen, you're putting your best 11 out against St Mirren midweek. Who is it?
Well, back 5 picks itself, I think. I think we go with Bain.
It's the team that beat Rangers, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Quite frankly, it is. I think Hatate's been pish recently, to be honest, but that's, again, a little bit of adjustment period is allowed for these players. It's just unfortunate it comes after they look so impressive in the first few games. He has been a little bit very off it, quite frankly. He's been completely off it in the last few games, keeps giving the ball away as well, and it has gone well beyond that imaginary point that I said, look, I'm fine with him giving the ball away because he's trying to make things happen, but there's a limit. He's gone miles
for the other team.
He's gone miles beyond that limit that I set myself in my own head. But I think the alternatives, you can't play O'Reilly and Rogic because we've seen it twice now and it's just a mess, really. I think you go with Hatate and O'Reilly for now.
It's just on the Riley and Rogic thing, I don't think that's so much a system error as in these two players can't possibly play together, right? Because they're good players. They both play in attacking positions, and I think one's left-footed, one's right-footed, and they've got enough differences and all that. I just think it's that Rogic's been so poor, it doesn't matter who you're playing in there with Tom Rogic, he's like a man down effectively.
Both left-footed, incidentally.
Yeah.
Are they? My mistake.
Look, Rogic has been decent domestically, but we're wanting to move beyond that, aren't we? Because you can't rely we'll play Tom Rogic every week, then when we get into Europe, now we can't play him because he doesn't play well in there. I want more energy in there, and that's why I think Hatate and O'Reilly, that Rangers game, the midfield three that day were absolutely brilliant. Abada was brilliant. Giakoumakis gave them a torrid time, and Jota, we just need to get...
Interestingly, no Maeda in both of your best starting 11s.
Not right now, but just as you said, Giakoumakis gives us something different because we can play it low or we can go high. It gives the defenders something to think about. Plus, you must have seen that tweet where it's genetically built in a lab for Livingston away, so we need that.
I still just don't really know what Maeda is yet. I don't really know what his best attributes and I know he's very fast and I know he works very hard and he runs about a lot. I couldn't for the life of me tell you what his best position is just yet. He's played wide left, he's played through the middle, maybe drifted a wee bit here and there. Don't know quite what he is yet.
I worry that Maeda best operates in space, and you don't get an awful lot of that in behind enemy lines when you're playing domestic opposition in these crowded boxes.
He's a bit similar to Kyogo, but isn't he? And he's had no problem with that. And when you watch, I know it's the old YouTube videos, but very similar sort of finishes. So I think if it could just be a wee confidence thing because he was playing where scored and then came in, then dropped out of the team, come back in. If the rest of the team's playing well against Hibs and Maeda has a bad game, you can go, aye, but it's not as if they're creating bucket loads of chances for the guy or passing it through to him and he's taking bad touches. They played it through to him once and he went round the keeper and the keeper done really well to get away with it. So just might take that one goal to get him going. But if Giakoumakis is fit for during the weekend and the weekend, I think he goes straight back in.
It's been pissed since he shaved that wee moustache off. Maeda, I think that may have been the source of his power.
We're not writing these guys off.
No,
we're
no,
not writing Maeda off. We're just talking about the here and now.
Bad week, mate.
In the performances. It was a bad week for us. It was a bad week for Rangers. I think both teams are going to drop points in these last 10 domestic games. I don't see any sustained run. And again, a couple of weeks ago, well, a couple of months ago, we sat and we were doing the podcast and we said this Rangers game's going to be huge. And then you're already, I know there's a lot of ties, a lot of football to be played, almost a month worth of football to be played between now and the next Rangers game. But again, I just can't help but focus on this Rangers game and go, that was going to be huge as well. Because that could be, in effect, a title decider.
Yeah, the fixtures between that, we have got Dundee United in there and there is an international break in there, but I think it's St Johnstone, St Mirren, Ross County and Livingston all before that game. You can get maximum points there. That will leave us 6 games in the
I just don't see it. I don't see us getting maximum points in those games.
The home the 3 of them are home games, I think, so they should take care of themselves, although home form's not been sparkling, but you've got to win the home games against those bottom 6 teams, and we simply have to go to Livingston and beat them sometime.
No, the law of averages says that we need to beat Livingston one time. Look, it's heating up, baby. The league is getting spicy. And you know what? I don't know how much stress I can get put through, because it's, for some reason, I'm feeling this league title campaign is just, I don't know if I've got the nerve to hold through, Steve.
Well, I wasn't going to reveal this, but now that you've brought up the stress, can you see that? Can you see this little patch here, just on my chin?
On you,
can you see
yeah.
it on the camera there? I've been pulling hairs out of there. The stress. I've got a little bald patch on my chin hair there. I've just been pulling hairs out of.
Some of these games have been pretty stressful for us. I think I remember, was it not last week we sat down and began the podcast with talking about how stressful a week it was? Or was it the week before? I can't remember.
The Dundee game was quite stressful.
Yeah.
Anyway, stop doing it, Celtic. Okay, we want league wins to be easy. We know all the hard work that you've put in, Ange. We know how difficult it's been building this team back up to potential league champions. But just make it a slight wee bit easier for us, and that would be good. And look, that brings an end to another episode of 20 Minute Tims. Thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you for everyone who watches on YouTube. Someone left a really kind comment last week on YouTube. He says, beggars belief that this channel's got less than 4,000 subscribers.
Right.
And actually, more than half of the people that watch this aren't actually subscribed. So just take a wee second and hit subscribe.
Please.
If you listen to this on our podcast app, please leave us a nice, lovely 5-star review. But most of all, thank you so much for listening.